Hi everyone, it's Dan from Indicia. Just give us a moment. We're just going to wait for a few more to join before we start. We'll just give it one more moment. Right, I think we'll kick off. Hello and welcome everybody to this Indicia Worldwide webinar. Today we're going to be exploring a pretty hot topic within the industry at the moment, and that's reimagining the path to purchase for tomorrow's consumer. My name's Dan Pallett. I'm the Global Head of Strategy and Planning here at Indicia Worldwide. My co-host today is our very own ECD, Tristan Pride. And I'm really happy to welcome our guest today, Jay Pattisall, who's the VP Principal Analyst over at Forrester. Thanks, chaps, for joining us today. So I suppose just to kick off, I mean, I think the reason we refer to this as a hot topic is for a number of reasons. You know, we all know that the global pandemic pretty much changed the way we shop overnight. And I think, you know, what that means to us as marketers is that we can no longer dictate the path to purchase. We very much now have to react to how the consumer chooses to shop. I think, you know, coupled with that, we can see across the industry, you know, consumers' tolerance, expectations, even their perceptions of marketing has radically shifted. And these are some of the areas that we're going to explore today. And I think one of the common challenges that we see across all of our clients here at Indicia Worldwide is that very real challenge around, you know, how can you actively engage with consumers along what are now very, very personalized paths to purchase, you know, across multiple channels, across multiple mindsets. And I suppose the last reason why it's a hot topic is fundamentally why it's so good to have Jay here today is that, you know, the amount of thought leadership, column inches, research that have gone into this topic just means it's on everybody's mindset, especially for us as marketeers. So the purpose of today's session is very much to begin to explore why do we need to change our mindset when it comes to the path to purchase, and just as importantly, you know, how do we need to adapt how we work in order to meet that. So the session today is split into 4 broad sections over the next 35 minutes or so. So we're going to start by looking at the industry and I suppose, you know, the agency landscape and how that's reacting to this challenge. We're then going to pivot towards the consumers and what their expectations and needs are. And then we're going to look at really, I suppose, diving a little bit deeper into, you know, how and what we should be doing in order to meet those needs. And then I'll wrap things up before, you know, in terms of just sort of relaying some of those key takeouts, and then we'll get on to your questions. And with that in mind, you'll see at the bottom of your screen, there's an area to submit questions. It's anonymous, so please go ahead and ask your questions throughout, and then we'll get to those right at the end. So I wonder, in terms of kicking things off, Jay, I'll probably focus on yourself for now, just as a bit of a scene setter. As I said, you know, it's great to have you on board to give that kind of helicopter view across the industry and the brand landscape in terms of this challenge. And, you know, I think what I'd love to do is almost refer to a quote that I read from yourself a couple of weeks ago. I think it was in the Drum, and it was from an event you were at, I think a media event in Orlando, where you said the way that marketing used to work is not the way that consumers are working today. It's not how they think and experience things today. And I think, you know, that pretty much gives us the problem statement. And I wonder whether, as a bit of a scene setter and kicking things off, would you mind elaborating a bit on the insights and the research that you've seen in order where you got to that thought?
Certainly. Thanks so much, Dan. Tristan, it's great to be here with you, and I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, you pull a very relevant quote, I think, for this particular topic, in that the marketing experience does not completely match the consumer experience. That advertising in the past was a mutual exchange for value and attention, and that exchange has been disrupted by the prevalence of channels and the fragmentation of audiences, and I think most importantly, a shift in the way that consumers behave and their expectations. So they view advertising as more interruptive than it was. I mean, it's always been an interruptive medium, even in its early days in print, radio, and television. But again, there was a willingness to accept that interruption for the value exchange, and with that value exchange having diminished, it feels and appears to be more interruptive. It's less relevant than it was in the past, because as audiences fragment and move into tribes or affinity groups, if you will, with specific ideas and beliefs, advertising is not at this stage able to speak in a more one-to-one manner with its audience. We have made great strides at personalization, but it still feels less relevant. A perfect example of this would be some of the shortcomings that we see in retargeting. When I purchase a pair of tennis shoes, I'm immediately being marketed the same pair of tennis shoes that I purchased a day before on my web experience, and that is one of the limitations of data and our ability to build personalization and relevant communications with that information. Another example in contextual environments, to assume if you use regional or geolocation or weather, to assume that that traditional and normal weather patterns hold. So I'm sitting in the northeast of the United States, and if we're constantly seeing advertising referencing poor weather while having actually uncharacteristically wonderful weather, again, another opportunity for a missed relevance. And I think ultimately it becomes annoying. For consumers, they indicate their annoyance at the lack of relevance and their willingness to purchase from brands that can communicate some value and provide them some relevance. So I think that part of the summation of this, Dan, is that the breakdown of the way that people have, their behavior has changed, has created this breakdown in the marketing funnel and in the process of marketing. We actually have an image that I think that begins to illustrate what that looks like. Yeah, in that we understand this linear process is no longer that. It's much more of a non-linear, chaotic process, of all the elements that are disrupting marketing, whether it be the third-party loss of third-party signals, or media inflation, or channel proliferation, or this avoidance that I was talking about from a consumer behavior standpoint. The thing that I think that impacts marketing most today is this collapse of the funnel and this nonlinear approach to marketing. It's a collision of what we typically thought of, as brand and performance, or what I call precision and persuasion, because things happen simultaneously, and consumers can enter and exit the purchase process at any point that they choose, and immediately, to use a Monopoly reference, skip the board and go go straight to, to go and collect $200, so to speak. And that forces us to rethink the type of marketing experience and advertising experiences that we need to deliver.
I think it's fascinating as well, is that, the reality is that you can jump from awareness through to purchase in a heartbeat now, in a millisecond. And that's something, I love the way you reference it as chaotic, because, from a planning and a strategy point of view, we love everything to be absolutely buttoned down. But now, this is what I was referring to, is that we can't dictate. We have to be there and have the tools in place to react as quickly as we can.
So, Jay, so what does that mean, or what are you seeing that means for marketers and brands? How are they coming to this now? How are they starting to try to cope with this new kind of landscape, new world?
Yes, to deal with the chaos, right? And to deal with an environment where we do skip from awareness to purchase in seconds. Brands are doing a number of things, among which is they're merging their marketing tactics to be able to improve the overall business impact. So, an example of this is, it's basically trying to meet, the type of connected experience that customers are looking for. So P&G is an example of this, and it was reported in the news not so long ago, where I think they upped their video budget around 60% for addressable TV, and we're communicating brand messages in these highly targeted environments. So they merged a brand message with a performance tactic. In order to find the audiences and deliver the branded message, and just do so in a highly targeted way. Bridgestone is another example of this in the US. They are a tire manufacturer and service provider, and they used addressable television to drive foot traffic to individual retail locations, again taking advantage of targeting and region and geography, but providing messages that are robust enough to have a call to action, but also to push the reason why to choose this brand over another, and drive traffic in that way. And so it really, these are great examples because they illustrate how it requires a much more nuanced understanding of audiences and where to find them. Like one of the buzz phrases that we hear frequently and have for the last few years is attention as a media metric or as a marketing metric, which is another way to say awareness, right? But I think but trying to achieve a level of salience, and so that you're not just making consumers aware of you in this annoying way, but like getting them to lean in and to lean forward. And so consequently, you need much more sophisticated understanding of an audience in order to draw that attention, or to draw that involvement. And so audience activation technologies, using CDPs or DMPs on a content side, matching that with dynamic asset DAM technology, and asset management platforms, and so this is about understanding the first party perspective of the audience, matching it with other sets of insights and data, zero party, third party, but being able to enrich your understanding of the audience and approach them with marketing in a much more kind of targeted way, so that you can kind of not so much follow the chaos, but be at the places that are relevant, and let the nonlinear process drive them to experience your communication and your brand at the places that matter most. and deliver them the information that makes sense, for that particular phase. And you know, to put a handle on it, I call this full funnel, kind of thinking from the top, resurrecting the old construct, thinking from the top of the funnel down to the bottom of the funnel simultaneously, and planning communications and building brand communications that can speak to all those touch points, no matter how they line up.
Yeah, and we've seen, over the last few years here at Indicia, exactly, that happening, and we've addressed the way that we work, addressed the way that we the tools, the skill sets that we have as a business to be able to help the marketers and the brands to deliver these sort of experiences. But just from a wider, because I know we'll come on to that in a minute, but again, from a wider view, what are you seeing in terms of the agency landscape? How are other agencies around the world adapting to tackle this for brands?
I mean, with so many different ways, Tristan, consolidations, mergers, acquisitions, organic expansions of, capabilities. That's the short answer. There are a great number of marketers that are looking for more integrated or consolidated resources, and it helps amongst their partners, and it helps them not only control the budget but create a more connected experience for those that are able to work with an integrated provider. Not every company is in a position to do so, and that has a lot to do with their organizational alignment, or in some instances that the lack thereof, right? And the lack thereof creates a more fragmented partner system. And that certainly can work, but it requires coordination, and sometimes isn't totally as efficient from a cost perspective as marketers are looking for. So as they're kind of faced with this do more with less conundrum, if you will, the integration of resources is one of the ways to do that. And so there are loads of examples of this. Where I mean, look to any consolidation or any merger or any M&A process. Group M, for example, in the media world, they combined Essence with Mediacom, as a way to do this. And there are a number of examples of combining agencies in order to pair the digital performance speciality with the brand expertise. And you'll see that play itself out in the media world and in the content and creative world. And a particularly interesting variety of it is the PE-backed, independent digital firms. What we typically think of are performance agencies. I think of them actually is a bit broader than just lower funnel performance agencies, because they're activating across a much wider range of marketing. And their version of it is a really interesting example, because it's not combining massive global scale across competencies. It's taking nimbleness and their digital expertise and organically building some creative and brand capabilities off of that. So there are many different ways in which agencies are kind of spinning up this full funnel approach.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Jay. I think we'll move on in a bit to talk about some of the processes and the way we've evolved as a business to start meeting these needs. I think what you've done really nicely for us is really set that scene from an industry perspective, and start touching on the consumer. And I think your point about being followed by a pair of tennis shoes from a retargeting point of view just resonates with all of us, and it gets to that annoyance. And what I'd like to do now, if it's okay, is to just focus for 5 minutes on some more of those consumer insights in terms of what's driving that behavior. Because I think we touched at the beginning about the pandemic fundamentally changing the way we shop, and we were all a part of it. That rapid adoption of e-commerce and digital overnight, because we had no choice. And you know, we as marketeers, we're having to react to that because this is the new normal, to use a very hackneyed term. But I think there's a quote from Essentia earlier this year, which kind of sums up the fact that these behaviors are here to stay. So they said, you know, the post-pandemic consumer expectations are not going to retreat to a previous state with regard to ease and convenience. Now consumers seek everywhere commerce, where transactions need not start and end in the same place or on the same medium. And I think, you know, that phrase, everywhere commerce, I would like to pick out from this, because for me, that kind of perfectly sums up this what we're referring to in this session as the chaos. But it is that blurred lines between digital and physical. It's that element of that full funnel marketing that you talk about, Jay, in that we have to be there. We have to be there at those moments to react to what we said. You know, somebody can go from awareness to purchase in an absolute heartbeat. But I think the flip side, and again, this goes back to, you know, the annoyance of retargeting and the frustrations of being actively bombarded, is that more ever than not, you know, we're in a time of marketing oversaturation, in that all of us, you know, we're marketeers and we get annoyed by the fact that we're getting bombarded with irrelevance and we're getting absolutely overwhelmed. And, you know, there's a stat here that says, you know, on a daily basis, 347 billion emails are sent and received every single day in 2023. And that kind of sums up the cause and effect of everywhere commerce, is that we've kind of opened the doors to having this deluge of marketing just thrown at us. And, you know, that's one of the massive downsides, because what that's doing is that's turning off the consumers. And, you know, I suppose when you look at it from its very, I suppose, neurological sense, in that, you know, we only have the capacity to take on so much information every single day. If you think about the left brain versus the right brain, the left brain is the side of the brain that's always on. It's the side of the brain that just processes what we see and it actually structures it for us. But we've only got so much bandwidth. And, you know, once we start getting overwhelmed with these 347 billion emails, with these retargeting, throwing tennis shoes at us for weeks on end, even though we've already bought them, our natural reaction as human beings is just to turn them off, is to filter them out, is to put our own coping mechanisms up, to say, I will actively avoid this noise because I just can't handle it anymore. And to be honest, it's doing my head in. And I suppose, you know, John, you know, Jay, sorry, we chatted last week about some of the stats that are coming out of the US at the moment. I don't know whether you wanted to quickly touch on those in terms of people actively avoiding. Oh, Jay, sorry, you're on mute.
I am mute. Speaking of the call sign of the pandemic, right? Yeah, there's a clear body of evidence for this. When we look at the data across our longitudinal research, the way that we ask this question is consumers' behaviors or reactions to individual advertising mediums. And when you look across 10 or so different channels, maybe a dozen channels, the average is about 35% of US adults are actively avoiding advertising, whether that be web or email or on their mobile devices or in social media or in some offline channels, you know, as well. And it varies, of course, you know, from channel to channel, and you can see, you know, that some channels will have a bit more relevance potentially with you know, than others. You know, out of home, for example, tends to be in this data set a little bit more quote unquote avoided, but I think that could be, you know, a result of the highway driving culture that we have in the United States, that kind of makes that more of a susceptible medium to kind of pass by. But across the board, 35%. And then when we look, you know, at some of the strategies to avoidance, one of the top, if you will, issues surrounding that is using ad blocking technology. And nearly a quarter of US adults use ad blockers. And in the data for the top 5 European nations, it's higher. It's well over a third are using ad blocking technology, just, you know, to wholesale opt out of online ads.
And that's just to block out the noise, isn't it? It's just to, you know, just give ourselves a break. And I think, you know, that makes our job as marketeers, as brand managers, as people that work in the industry even harder, because it makes it even harder to cut through to a disengaged audience that frankly doesn't want to listen. And I think, you know, we talked about the left-hand side of the brain being completely overwhelmed. I think when you look at the science and you think, you know, there is a fact that positive emotion can influence consumers to make an unconscious decision. And that's very much the right brain. And for me, if we're going to cut through along the path to purchase through relevancy and personalization, we have to appeal to the right brain, the right-hand side of the brain, because the right-hand side, that's the intuitive side. That's the side that acts completely on intuition. It's completely subconscious. And that's where, you know, if we can connect through a positive connection, we can quickly help people make unconscious decisions quickly. Because, you know, marketing communications along the path to purchase that appeal to the right brains are the ones that will connect and engage, because they're doing it subconsciously. People haven't got those automatic filters on. And the reason why that works is because they strike such a personal emotion, that connection, so to speak, that they get to consumers to act without realizing that. And that's not us being, you know, completely underhand or the dark arts or anything. It's just a simple quote. If we can connect emotionally, it means we're doing our job from relevancy, targeting, and actually being quite useful. I suppose, Tris, from your perspective, creatively, how can you connect with that emotion?
Well, I'd say, you know, from advertising, you know, it's connecting from an emotional point of view, and with a consumer. Brands have been, you know, or agencies, that's what they've been dining out on for years and years and years. You know, that's a good piece of advertising, connects on an emotional level. And so we're not saying that we now suddenly need to do that across the whole of the customer journey in every single way. Whereas in the past, maybe there were certain areas of the customer journey that we did it. What we now need to be able to do is actually understand, how do we do this in the right places of this slightly more chaotic kind of customer journey as such? And when do we need to be able to have the rational side, the left brain kind of kicking in enough to then balance the right brain, and vice versa? Because the thing is, we know that the emotional side is really, really valuable to a brand. So we need to make sure that we are using that in our communications and in as many places as we can, but in the right way and not too much. So there is a balance there.
And I think, you know, just to end this kind of section, so to speak, I think we know that if we can connect emotionally, we've seen the stats out there, and it is proven that 70% of emotionally engaged customers spend more than twice as much with the brands that they're loyal to. And that's because we're doing our job from a relevancy and a personalization point of view. We're reacting to their own personalized journeys. We're being there at the moments that matter. And that's when you can connect them from emotion and actually drive loyalty and spend. So I think we've covered off the sort of brand and the industry perspective. We've touched on the agency landscape. We've dived a little deeper in terms of those consumer insights. And I think what I'd now like to do is finish this sort of discussion, or have a bit more of a discussion, so to speak, around, I suppose, looking at the how, looking at, you know, some of the learnings and the findings that we've found as a business, and how we've had to adapt in order to meet these new customer needs. So I suppose from an Indicia worldwide point of view, our mission is fundamentally simple. Our mission is to shorten the distance between brand love and brand buy, by, I suppose, through end-to-end customer-focused marketing that simply just engages. We've evolved in order to meet these consumer needs. We've evolved to meet the industry and the brand needs, and we've done this over the period of the last couple of years, not just looking at our end-to-end services and products and the capabilities that we're able to offer, but very much looking at the skill set and the capabilities and the talents that we need to bring into the business in order to actually look at that full funnel approach that Jay talked about. We do this so that we can help brands, I suppose, deliver audience-first, frictionless, omni-channel customer experiences along that path to purchase. And at the heart of that is the combination of data, tech, and creativity. And the reason why that's so important is, as a business, it allows us to, I suppose, balance marketing performance with marketing production efficiencies to really drive ROI to the clients that we work with. Now, starting with data, I mean, that's fundamentally our lifeblood. It's what the business was founded on. And this gives us that all-important audience first view of the world, what Jay was referring to. And, it's that combination of, as we were saying, first party, zero party, even third party data, giving us the audience insights, which means that we can be relevant, personalized, reactionary, and there in those moments of when they matter. The tech capabilities that we've brought in. This means that we can drive personalization and relevancy at scale with efficiencies. So it's not just about the right message at the right time, but it's also making sure it's in exactly the channel that consumer wants to engage with. So fundamentally allowing brands to play exactly where their consumers are playing with agility and being completely reactionary about it. And I suppose from a creative point of view, I'm going to pass it over to Tris because he'll kill me if I start talking about creative.
That's okay. Yeah, well, from a creative point of view, it's about connecting the insights that drive that emotional cut through, executing them through personalized and consistent creative messaging, across the path of purchase. That means we can transform the relationship your brand has with the consumer, from a mere transactional interaction to one that is centered on emotion. And then as I said before, it's where that emotion is dialed up and down to the type of comments into the different situations.
And I suppose, Tris, staying with your good self, now that you're here, we've talked a lot about how we've evolved the products and the services and the capabilities within the agency. I think if we were to focus on creative, and from your perspective, from a creative, everything that we've talked about today about the shift in audience expectations, the shift in how brands and clients want to interact with their agencies, what the implications has that had on the way creators create and how they work?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting topic, something I'm quite passionate about because it involves the makeup of your team and how your team works. So I'm going to just talk through three separate areas really. So creative tech, creative process, and creative talent. And truthfully, they're all intrinsically linked. To be able to consistently deliver these type of experiences, you need all three of these to be working together. But I'll start with talent. And for ourselves, what we have done over the last few years through our recruitment, building the team to deliver this sort of thing, is that we have quite a senior team. So if you think of a networked agency that might have 12, 14 different separate creative businesses as such within there, my team is made up of that kind of like top level of creatives within my team. And what that allows us to do is to kind of bring together the right people at the right time for that ecosystem, for that consumer journey that we're doing. But importantly, we also bring in our production side of the business. So we have a full global production capabilities, and with these experiences, we are delivering at scale lots of the time. So you need to have that mindset and understanding combined as well. So it's all of those people together working as one, and we bring them at the very start. So rather than your standard kind of kickoff session, we run a session where we bring the experts together of the different areas that we should be considering. And we consider what problem we are trying to solve for the brand and for the consumer. And through that process and through that exercise, we then actually work out our process, our path to delivering the communications and the comms experience for the brand, for the consumers. So it means that we have to work in a very, very agile way because the process could be totally different from one project to the next because of the separate or the different channels that you're bringing in. And I think you have to have the right kind of mindset to work in that. So that is why, as I said, it's taken us a number of years of employing the right type of people across the business who are just, they have the soft skill of collaboration, which is almost number one, really, because if you can't collaborate, you can't work this way. And we've seen it. I'm sure we've all seen it time and time again through our careers, where a specialist agency comes up with a solution for a project, which is just happens to be their specialist subject. When you're working across the whole of it, you still need those specialists, but you need them to be open-minded, to be able to work out what's the best thing to deliver and the best directions to go into. So what we find is this way of working allows us not to be siloed in our thinking, and not to be a specific channel first. It allows us to be led by the data. And then because we're being led by the data, we can then understand where we can kind of have the biggest impact for our consumer and for our brands. And then we also can understand to the balance of how much of the emotional, rational side, because obviously, if you are starting more from a retail perspective, for example, because that's correct, or for the problem that you're solving, the right level of emotion within that kind of situation, and then across the supportive kind of channels, so we can dial it up and down, and you don't have 2, 3, 4 agencies that being passed from one to the other to try to make this kind of cohesive kind of mix, really. But Dan, obviously there's wider implications of working through this. But Dan, just going back to yourself, do you want to just touch on what we have seen with some of our clients because of this way of working?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you ultimately see is working this way means that the client feels that they've genuinely got a partner that they're working with, somebody that isn't just focused on their specific channel or just on the product in terms of how are we going to sell this. But it just means that if it's agency to agency collaboration or collaboration within the agency across strategy, data, creativity, tech, it just means that we have a deep understanding of the business challenges that are underpinning that client and the brands that we're working with. So, for instance, if you were to take something like their values or sustainability, for instance, and if we were working on an idea from start to finish, from ideation through to execution, we would ensure that sustainability was baked in from the very start, so that every single aspect of that idea was sustainable. And when we got to execution, it was sustainable through and through. And I think that's what our clients are really benefiting from, is to say, well, you're our partner because you understand that sustainability or another value is really important to our business. We have to be credible in this area. Our consumers expect it. And it just means if you were to take an ideation from a piece of point of sale all the way through to when we executed it in store, it would have sustainability throughout because we're collaborating from start to finish. But I suppose, Tris, I'm going to throw it right back at you. You've talked about talent and process. I wonder whether you want to touch on the tech element now, in terms of what role that tech element plays within your creative processes.
Yeah, of course. So any transformation, and this is, for our industry, it's been going for a few years now, but it is a transformation, and that is led by the talent. But then you need to empower that talent, and you need to give them the right tools. So technology, we create and develop our own proprietary technology throughout the business. And one of the things, and again, it's a hot topic really, which is AI, and that is something that we do use a lot within our team and our teams to be able to deliver these type of experiences. So AI in the production side of our business, we've used that for a good number of years, because if you think if there's something that happens and it can happen on the same way multiple times, and then we can create technology and we can integrate AI to be able to do that for us to drive efficiencies. And that very much our production size, it's about driving efficiencies for brands. So AI is quite prominent. But we also bring that across our creative side of the business as well. And what we have over the last kind of 18 months or so, yes, if there's an area where we can repeat it, we're bringing the tech and we're driving efficiencies that way, the creative side. But predominantly AI, for example, we use as an inspiration. We use it to kind of benchmark our thinking, to stretch our thinking, to make sure that we are delivering as high a level for our clients as we possibly can. So within our very agile process, we have this kind of research inspiration phase, as we call it, on every single project. And that is where every creative, and by creative, I mean the people that are working on that project, because that is from every part of our business, but includes partners and clients as well. It's at that point where we integrate the AI into it and explore and experiment. In some cases, we might allow the output of the AI to go live for brands. Not usually. Usually, like the generative sort of side of what we do. Like I said, it's about making sure we've pushed ourselves to the max. And then if it's something that we use and we find works well for us and works well for our brands and consumers, we'll then incorporate that into our next kind of project that we do for them. So there's always this kind of learning and developing and bringing in when we talk about technology. Dan, like, again, throwing it back to yourself, but from an AI point of view, because I know Jay's going to just mention a few things on AI, but before we do, how have you found within your team, you've been using that?
Well, it's been an interesting one from a strategy perspective, because you could argue that strategists and AI are doomed never to get on with each other. But I think, we're exactly the same as you guys. I mean, we fundamentally, if you take ChatGPT as an example, we're beginning to explore how we use that best as an inspiration tool more than anything, because what we can find is that it can give inspiration in terms of brand propositions or creative propositions, or even looking across things like customer journey planning, etc. But I suppose one thing we've found is that with something like ChatGPT, it's only as good as the prompts that you're able to give it, and it's only as good as what you're asking it to do. You can have a lot of fun with it, but if you put the right prompts in, it can really help shape your thinking. It's not going to give you the answer by any stretch of the imagination. And I think anybody in my strategy team, if you were to tell them that a ChatGPT could write a better brand proposition, then they'd probably kill you. But it's there for inspiration. It's there to help shape the thinking. I think one watch out we found with something like ChatGPT is it's not a search engine. It's not there as a search tool. And what it can still do, based on some of the limitations, is it still can have a propensity to confidently provide factually incorrect information, because it's only as good as what it's bringing back to you. So to your answer, we're exploring it, certainly, and we're beginning to use it to sense check things like brand propositions. But I suppose, Jay, from your point of view, looking out at the agency landscape, what's your research showing from the usage of AI?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is this technology is poised to transform a little bit the way that we work and the way that that some marketing is executed. And so we're seeing a lot of similar use cases to what you and Tristan were describing, brainstorming and authoring and organizing information, particularly from the generative AI context. But if you step back, I mean, and AI is not new. It's been around quite a while, and where it found a center of gravity in the marketing advertising world was in the media space initially, and that was very much kind of like machine learning, robotics, processing, automation technologies that were helping to speed up knowledge and understanding, so you could make decisions about audiences and channels and budgets and allocations. So media intelligence, business intelligence, some consumer intelligence, and a little bit of creative intelligence. Like you could start to glean and understand what messages or what topics would make sense for certain audiences. And so really the combination of predictive technologies and generative AI technologies is an interesting place to look at, because when you're looking at the combination of the two, which is a smarter view of your audience, combined with some tools to rapidly produce ideas or thought starters or initial executions or drafts, if you will, then we're looking at a situation where the machine intelligence is enhancing the human intuition, and it's an assistant. It assists the creators to amplify what strategists, designers, copywriters, technologists are doing. It's a situation in which these roles that I'm describing, they become more of curators in what they're doing with information. They're creating information in addition to pulling and harvesting information from software and then folding the two together. And that's kind of a process of curation and revising and editing and tweaking and changing, so the human involvement becomes a very important component to work with the technology, and keeping humans involved is, for many of the reasons, Dan, that you were describing some of the shortcomings, is an important thing to do. And it gets you to the point where you and your team, or Tristan and his team, are able to look at the quality, the creative quality that you produce, and reconcile that with the scale and the speed from the machines. But we see that agencies are kind of deploying and employing these technologies at different speeds and different rates and different strides, if you will. They're taking a very different approach. Tristan's description of and Dan, your description of taking the technology and using it in an experimental context is what we've described as kind of like the implement with caution approach, and taking a step back and understanding how to use this and how to incorporate technology like ChatGPT or Midjourney or DALL-E into your workflow, and then while you're determining how to roll it out kind of more enterprise across the organization so you can apply it to clients. There's some agencies that are being a bit more cavalier, if you will, and that are using the technology to implement and execute right now. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, so long as there are a lot of safeguards in place. And these are things like not entering proprietary or sensitive information into the public versions of generative AI platforms. Don't describe the audience. Don't put sales data. Don't elaborate on objectives. Don't talk about a new product or a new product launch or something that's that's sensitive. All of that information goes into the public mainframe, if you will, of the models. And so you want to protect against that. You want to log your prompts so that you can have a record of what you're asking and what's coming out of the technology, so you can not only operationally demonstrate what's what, but should questions arise in the future, you've got a log to demonstrate what you've done and what you've not done. Training, I think, it becomes a really important piece for this as well. And so we have this approach that that we've been starting to shape together, and we call it an adoption approach. And it's just about, inspiring the right use, the right understanding, training to provide the right level of experimentation and adoption, and then providing resources through partnerships, and knowledge and use. And so this diligent approach of adopting the technology and while you're figuring out how to scale it across the enterprise in a responsible way, makes a lot of sense. A lot of agencies are taking that approach, and I think it's going to put the industry at a position where generative AI becomes a bit of a superpower. It gives the teams some speed and efficiency that marketing needs. You know, if we go back to the very top of this this webinar and discussion, we talked about that kind of paradoxical need for marketers to do more with less. This is a technology that can help do that from a content perspective and from a kind of media and placement activation perspective. And so I think we anticipate over the next 12 months that we're going to see a lot of this technology as part of the standard fare coming from agencies to help create really quality creative at scale.
And I think that certainly resonates with the journey we're on as an agency at the moment, in terms of, you know, potentially moving from, as you say, Jay, that implement with caution to more of an adoption and actually learning and evolving with it. Thank you so much, Jay and Tris. I think I can see now that 51 minutes has absolutely flown by. And, you know, I've personally found this topic in particular absolutely fascinating. I think we could have spent 51 minutes talking about AI alone, to be fair. But, you know, what I'd like to think is we've covered a lot today. And, you know, in my mind, we've kind of set the stall out and scratched beneath the surface. And I think, you know, what I'd love to do is think about, you know, how we move on from this and how we keep the conversation going. I think from my point of view, you know, we've really touched on the, you know, the why brands need to change their thinking on this topic, how they need to adapt their approach in order to reimagine that path to purchase for tomorrow's consumer, and ultimately drive ROI in their marketing spend, to pick up on that paradox that you were talking about, Jay. Unfortunately, I think we're gonna run out of time before we get to any questions. So I think what we can commit to do is answer the questions that have been asked and get back to people via email. But I think what I'd love to do now is just summarize some of the key takeouts from this session. So COVID-19 completely changing shopper behavior. You know, we talked about, you know, that you know, it's known to all of us, but what that's fundamentally resulted in is this principle of everywhere commerce, this ability to go from awareness through to purchase within a heartbeat. To Jay's point, that consumer experience no longer matches the linear funnel, and that's, you know, and it doesn't match what consumer needs at the moment. And what we need to do is integrate that media, creative, data analytics capabilities to optimize audiences, channels, and the content, and that's critical to success. You know, we talked about the need for sophisticated activation platform, a CDP, what have you, because without that, you're not going to have, I suppose, the power to enable that first party, third party, zero party data to give you that audience first. That relevant, personalized marketing that drives that emotional connection is what's going to cut through the noise, you know, appealing to the right hand side of the brain. And then everything we just talked about here, adapting how creators create and how they work is crucial to this, because it's that combination of creative talent, process, and tech all coming together. And I think that last conversation we had around, you know, the need for agencies to really adopt AI in order to, you know, balance that need to do less with to do more with less, I think is going to be critical to meeting these consumer needs. So what I'd love to do is just say to you know, my co-host Tris, and to our guest today, Jay, thank you so much for taking the time out today to talk to us. And I'd like to thank our global audience for tuning in today, and hope to see you soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.